right? As we're in the midst of this health crisis, as it's being called, which it is, it's definitely serious, certainly. However, I feel like a lot of news sources, a lot of social media as well, is spreading some information that maybe has not been verified, information that is causing people to panic. So we really have to be careful. But it got me thinking back to other times of crisis that I could think of, that I have lived through. And I thought back to things like September 11th. After that happened, there was lots of misinformation being spread. The day of the event, and then in the days, weeks, months, even years following that, there was lots and lots of misinformation. In addition to that, I was thinking of, I'm not sure if you guys heard about it, but in 2013, there was a bombing that happened at the Boston Marathon. And that was another horrible event. It was another horrible terrorist attack. But even in the hours after that happened, there was misinformation all over the internet. And you could watch it being spread in real time if you were following the stories on the news, following them on social media. You were seeing a lot of information flying around that none of which was verified, and it ended up leading to some pretty bad consequences. At one point, people were saying, I know who did it, I know the guy who did it, I saw a picture, I matched the picture from the surveillance cameras at the event, and this picture I found online, this is the guy. And it wasn't the guy. So you can see how spreading misinformation can have a very real effect. So I found this graph online that I've found to be very interesting, and I feel like it really breaks down kind of where a lot of news sources fall when it comes to certain biases that they have and the quality of their reporting. So first, to explain kind of how the graph is set up, you can kind of cut it in half. On the left side, there's news that has a more liberal bias, or we could also say a left-leaning bias. If something is left-leaning, it tends to be more liberal in its political views. Then on the right side, it's the opposite. These are very conservative or right-leaning biases over here. And then what you have right in the middle would be considered to be the most neutral news sources that are available, or as neutral as possible, because it is important to note that all of these news sources have some kind of bias, right? There is not a news source that exists that does not have some kind of bias. And in addition to that, we all have our own biases too, right? But for the purpose of this graph, in the middle here, these would be what would be considered to have minimal partisan bias. Something that is partisan is something that adheres strongly to one political view or another. So something that is very partisan has a very strong opinion on one side or the other. But these are considered to have minimal partisan bias. So we're looking at sources like NPR, National Public Radio, that's a very popular news source in America, BBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times, MSNBC, ABC News, CBS News, the Associated Press, and Reuters. Those all fall, they're considered to meet high journalistic standards, and they're relatively neutral. Now above those, these sources here, while they are a bit spread out, and some of them have a stronger bias than many of these in the middle, they're considered to be of a bit higher quality. They do what is considered to be complex reporting, meaning they go further in depth with their articles and reporting than a lot of these sources might. So up here we have The Atlantic, The Guardian, Slate, Vox, Those all fall a little to the left. And then we have The Economist, The Wall Street Journal, The Fiscal Times, and The Hill, which fall a little more to the right. And now while they do have a bit stronger bias than these do, they're still, quality-wise, they're still very trustworthy sources. So then as we kind of branch out from the middle, start going out from the middle, this is where the biases start getting stronger. So over to the left, getting just a little further out, we have MSNBC and the Huffington Post. These are still considered to be analytical news sources, so the quality of the reporting is still relatively high. However, the bias is getting stronger. So because of that, at times, you might question the journalistic value, right? You might question how much of this article is the opinions and views of the company or the reporter, and how much is factual. And then as we get down here to the outliers, right? These are considered sensational or clickbait, right? Do you guys know what clickbait is? No. Okay, so clickbait is a link or an article from a website whose wording is crafted in such a way so that you simply are curious about it. But the way that they word it, they often use hyperbolic language, so it could be very sort of extreme, and it's going to catch your eye, and you're going to be curious about it, and all they want you to do is click. Now, the quality and the accuracy of what's in that article is highly questionable. Anything that's clickbait, you want to stay away from that.
What's the name for that kind of link? What? Sorry?
Clickbait.
Oh.
Clickbait. And they could also be called sensational, which those two ideas generally more or less have the same meaning. So these would be considered to have an extreme liberal bias, these down here. Things like Addicting Info, Occupy Democrats, US Uncut, Natural News. These are articles that if you saw the link on Facebook or anywhere else, you would not want to click on them. You can see here the quality is very low and the bias is very high. So then as we start getting over to the right then, we have Fox News, which many of you are maybe familiar with Fox News. Fox News is very well known in America as being highly right-leaning with a very strong conservative bias. Very strong. However, somehow, they do still meet relatively high journalistic standards. And Fox News is interesting because they have a political link. Donald Trump loves Fox News. The Republican Party overall loves Fox News. It's not uncommon for Donald Trump to watch Fox News in the morning and tweet about what he watched later in the day. He's also been known to call into their shows and speak on air for hours at a time. And Fox News has a lot of influence politically. They do. At times, they have criticized what some politicians, including Trump, have done. And then he has changed what he does. So they have a very, very strong political link and influence. But I would not consider it high quality. And then we get down here, and this is garbage down here. That's all that is, really. These sources, they spread conspiracy theories. It's horrible stuff. So we have InfoWars. I don't know if you guys have heard of InfoWars. It's only conspiracy theories. That's all they talk about, really. not of any kind of quality at all. And then we have Breitbart. Breitbart is similar to InfoWars in that they spread a lot of conspiracy theories, yet they also have a very strong racial bias. A lot of their reporting could be seen as being racist, and it definitely is. Their owner, the owner of Breitbart, has worked for Trump at certain times throughout his time as president. So those two are really perhaps the worst of the worst when it comes to these sources up here. Then there are things like the Blaze, Red State, the Daily Caller. Again, just like with these down here, you're going to be seeing really just only bias. Only the bias of the company, of the reporters. It's really of no quality, really. And then kind of jumping back to the middle for a second, here, these would be considered to be, again, relatively neutral sources. However, they do fall down into the area of being a bit sensational. CNN, they often can be kind of sensationalist about things. And the USA Today as well. So with them, what would be a good thing to do is if you find a story on CNN, you might want to compare it with something up here, just to get a second opinion, which is always a good thing to do. Now this graph was created in 2016, and a lot has changed in news media since then. So while I agree with probably 90% of what is up here, I would say some things have changed since then. So I would say NPR has probably started to move a bit this way. A lot of people have told me the BBC has started to move this way. I would say perhaps CNN might be starting to go that way a little bit. But overall, I agree with a lot of what is up here. So if you guys had to think of the top news sources in Spain, right? The newspapers or websites or news channels that people watch every day, and if you were to put them on this graph, where do you think they would go?